It's time to make some noise. Welcome to Sound Off Sports. I'm your host, Mike Davis. On today's show, we're talking about QBs in the NFL draft. Where would you want to be drafted if you were one of those top QBs? Plus, we got a great conversation with the Hall of Famer, Greg Maddux. Plus, we're talking about all these new NFL uniforms. Would you buy them if that was your team? We're breaking down all those new looks. Sound Off Sports starts right now.
Make some noise. This is Sound Off Sports.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us on Sound Off Sports. I'm your host, Mike Davis. It's a great time, ladies and gentlemen. It's time for the NFL draft, one of the best periods of the whole sports year. I'm joined now by my producer, James Edward Barrickman IV. James, we love the NFL draft. I've been mocking it out. I've been looking at mock drafts. I've been doing some of my own. So much excitement. This year, the draft's really about QBs, and it's very deep when it comes to offensive linemen and wide receivers as well. But everybody's talking about the quarterback needs of a lot of these teams at the top of the draft. James, we're going to be breaking down kind of a fun exercise for us, whether if we were one of these top QBs, where we would want to land, you know? So I think a lot of times we think about what happened last year. Is it more so, you know, CJ Stroud, or is it more so the situation, or is it a combination of both that makes him succeed over, you know, a first overall pick like Bryce Young? So James, tell us, before we get into actually where, if you were one of the quarterbacks, where you would want to be selected, what's your answer there? Do you think CJ Stroud is really just that much better than a Bryce Young, or is it a combination of situation?
It's definitely a combination of both. Like, obviously, C.J. Stroud is an absolute stud. He's like top 7 already. But I think it goes back to the argument of you need the fit, right? You need the team around you, but you also need to select the right quarterback. You got to be able to play. And it goes back to, like, for example, is it Brady? Was it Belichick, the Patriots dynasty? It was both. Do you think Brady was going to do all that by himself? No. Could Belichick have done it without Brady? No. You need both. Like Montana and Bill Walsh. You need the head coach and quarterback situation right. You need to get them both right to succeed, and that's kind of where I stand. So I'm saying it's a mixture of both.
And we've seen that with so many instances, like you just mentioned, also Reed and Mahomes. There's tons of evidence in this vein. But when we're talking about in this year's draft, I think there's one guy we can all agree on that no matter the situation, no matter the fit, no matter who's his head coach, he's going to be a success in the NFL. And that's why people have been talking about Caleb Williams going first overall for the past 2 years. But the draft really starts after the Chicago Bears eventually take Caleb Williams number 1. So that means we got the Washington Commanders, we got Denver, Vegas, the Giants, we got New England, we got Minnesota, we got all these teams looking to take quarterback in the draft. They need to address that position. So James, if you were one of these top quarterbacks after Caleb Williams, if you wanted to be selected to a team, you're a quarterback, you want to get off to the right start, kind of like how Eli didn't want to go to the Chargers and he wanted to go to the Giants. If you were a quarterback about to be selected, where would you want to go? What would be your ultimate destination?
It wouldn't be New England and it wouldn't be Washington. That's for sure. If I'm ideally out of any of these quarterback needy teams in the first round, I would want to go to Minnesota. You have an offensive head coach in Kevin O'Connell who's a stud. You have the best wide receiver in the league in Justin Jefferson, a great number 2 in Jordan Addison. Hawkinson, that great tight end they got. Now Aaron Jones, you got a top running back. And their O-line's really good, too. They probably got a top 10, top 12 O-line with 2 great tackles in Darisaw and Brian O'Neill. So I don't think it's close. As far as just the situation from a football perspective, I would want to go play for Minnesota.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100% there. I think number 2, if we're going to add him into the mix, Chicago is a great situation with
100%.
GM Ryan Poles has done for Caleb Williams to ensure that he has a great support system around him, so when he enters the league, he can have success right off the bat. Justin Fields didn't get that, you know. Caleb Williams is going to have Keenan Allen. He's going to have, you know, Cole Kmet's not bad. He also has DJ Moore. He's got a nice offensive tackle from last year in Darnell Wright. And at that number 9th overall pick, they could go tackle again, or they could take like a Roma Dunze or try to take a Brock Bowers, somebody else who can be in that arsenal for Caleb to throw the ball to. So after those 2, I think those are the 2 clear-cut landing spots that if you're a quarterback, if you get to play with Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota and everybody there with Jefferson and Addison, or if you can go to Chicago, those are the two great spots. But then we got Denver, Vegas, we got New York Giants, we got Washington Commanders, and we got the Patriots. This is where it gets tough. I think you and I are aligned, James, that we think having Sean Payton as a head coach is a nice next step, right?
That clears pretty much everything else just for that reason, Sean Payton.
Yeah, so I think that's where we're there after that. After that situation, I'm kind of iffy, but I think Vegas is probably the next best place because you get Devontae Adams. You're playing, on a good field in a good situation in a dome. And, I think there could be some people out there who are like, listen, Washington Commanders, they have scary Terry McLaurin. They have Dotson. They have Eckler now. There's a new situation there with Cliff Kingsbury. So maybe that's not a bad fit. But to me, the bottom of the pack is New England and New York Giants.
Oh, I think pretty clearly New England is the last place that I would want to go if I was one of these quarterbacks. Bad O-line, inexperienced head coach who was only ever a linebackers coach.
Right.
And he's, his expertise is on the defensive side of the ball. Arguably the worst weapons in the league offensively. They're gonna be bad, New England, unless this quarterback comes in and totally lights it up. Alex Van Pelt, who's a really experienced offensive coordinator, I think will help, but that's really the only saving grace there, I think.
So, and the Giants is not a good situation either because, you got really nobody to throw the ball to. Don't know if Darren Waller's even gonna play. Saquon's out the door. So now you really got nobody to pass to, and you're also kind of competing with this guy who's got a massive contract in Daniel Jones. So it's all a weird situation, but I think the number one thing we're trying to drive home here is the fact that, yes, there's a lot of talent in the draft. There's a lot of quarterbacks that are going to, be potential game changers or franchise changers for some of these NFL teams, but a lot of it comes down to the circumstances and the fit. We heard a lot about that last week on this show from former quarterback Jay Schrader. So we'll have a lot more to break down after the draft, but for now, that's what we think. Minnesota, Chicago, you guys, if you draft a quarterback, there's going to be a lot of promise in your future. Coming up after a short break, yes, we're talking to the Hall of Famer, the guy who could perfectly place that pitch. We're talking about location, location, location. Just like real estate, that's what Greg Maddux did on the mound. We got a one-on-one interview with him coming up after a short break. Welcome back to SOS. All right, so I'm so excited to have you listen to my interview with Greg Maddux, the Hall of Famer. He joined me a little bit earlier on our More show here at Fox 5 Las Vegas. Take a listen to this interview. For 23 seasons, our next guest was turning out the lights for hitters in the big leagues. He's a Baseball Hall of Famer, but on April 27th and 28th, he's hosting the second annual Baller Dream Celebrity Poker Tournament at Circa Resort. We're so honored to be joined by baseball legend and Hall of Famer Greg Maddux. Greg, thanks so much for joining us. First of all, let me ask you this. Poker-wise, how good of a poker player are you?
Very beginner, very beginner. I mean, I've sat down here at a table once in a lifetime here in Vegas, or, once or twice a year here in Vegas. It's a very casual format. I mean, this tournament is intended for beginners, and it's all about raising money and having a good time and, hanging out with the celebrities that are going to show up. We got Randy Johnson, Tito Ortiz, Jose Canseco, Terrell Davis, Raleigh Fingers, Derek England, Jim McMahon, and a lot more guys are going to show up. So it's all about raising money for the Baller Dream Foundation, and we're out to have a good time and try to do a good thing for some people who need our help.
I love it, and all those great celebs, but let's talk about how this really impacts the community. So this event, it's all to raise money for kids battling cancer, but the money, it all stays locally here in Vegas, right?
It does. Yeah, it will. Absolutely. And, we're going to give away 50 grand to the winner. Hopefully they'll donate some of that money back. But, the Baller Dream supports kids up to age of 29. Most cancer places kind of time out at 18. So, we kind of help the older kids a little bit more. And, we put put them on trips, excursions, sporting events, things like that, help pay their medical bills. So, we're out to try to help as much as we can, and we'd love to have the guys come out and buy a spot and come see us down at Circa.
I love it. Now, everybody can go get tickets. The code you can see right there, that's all the information on the screen. The code to get 30% off tickets online is Baller30. That's the code to get some tickets off online. I mean, Greg, I got to ask you, you went to Valley High School here in Las Vegas, coming back full circle. Now we're seeing, the Oakland Athletics, now they're going to Sacramento. Eventually they're going to come here to Vegas. Growing up, going to Valley High School, what would it mean to you as a kid? What would it mean to this community to have an MLB franchise here in Vegas?
Oh, I think it's going to be great. I remember when I was at Valley, the Stars just came out, and we used to go over to Cashman Field and watch the guys there, and to have a big league club here in Vegas would be awesome. The Knights and the Raiders have done well. I don't see why the A's won't do as well as those two franchises also. So, it'd be nice to go see a big league game where you don't have to get on a plane.
Exactly. All right. And I want to draw a parallel here because baseball to me is so much fun. A lot of it because of the pitching, and pitching and that mano-a-mano kind of situation. And poker, to me, I feel like there's a lot of mental play as well. When you're on the mound, you're facing off against a pitcher. I mean, you pitched 23 years. Over 5,000 innings pitched, 744 games pitched. You faced 20,000 batters. But besides the mechanics, besides the location, the accuracy, all the great things you did, just the mental game, right? When you're at a poker table and you're going, head to head with somebody, you got all your chips in. What's the mental game like on the mound, and do you think it carries over to that felt table when you're playing poker?
Absolutely. I think you always want to throw the highest percentage pitch you can. I think the whole secret about pitch selection is what's the easiest pitch I can throw that's going to stay in front of the outfield. And I think that's kind of like a poker game. A poker game's the same way. If I'm 3-1 to draw my flush and there's 5 people in the hand, then you might think about raising. But if it's just one and head to head, now you're thinking about bluffing. So. You always look to have the odds in your favor and try to play accordingly.
I love it. The great Hall of Famer, Greg Maddux, one of the best ever, great guy, an ace in our community as well. Thanks for hosting this great event, guys. We're putting all the information on the screen. Once again, Baller Dream, make sure you go check out this great celebrity poker tournament. It's at Circa. We all love Circa. And you can get 30% off right now with that code BALLER30. Thanks so much, Greg. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Always love speaking with the great Greg Maddux. Guys, coming up after a short break, we're asking you at home what you think about the slate of these new NFL uniforms. There's so many new jerseys. We want to know what you think and if you would buy them if they were your team. That's next after the break. Well, we all know it's a big week in the NFL when it comes to the NFL draft, but it was also a big week for the NFL when it comes to the uniforms. Yes, a lot of teams changing up their look this week. James, we heard and we asked everybody at home what they thought about some of these new looks, these new changes, and if this was one of their teams who changed up their look, would they buy a jersey? Who did we hear from?
This first one is from Carl C.L. Andrews via Facebook. He said, I'd buy the Texans and the Lions alternates, all 3. Maybe on the Jets alternate, and a heck no on the Broncos. The Broncos should have made their color rush uniforms their main uniforms along with the white helmets.
I agree with this dude, yes. Denver's jerseys didn't look good, but I did like the throwback ones. Houston's new look was sweet, and the Lions had a really nice update, I felt, to their uniforms for their home, their away, plus the black ones. But James, as our Yinzer, a resident Yinzer, as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, I know you were kind of going nuts in the back office about what this means, and you were puzzled by why franchises altered their look so much. Give us your take.
Do you ever notice that it's always the bad teams that are constantly changing their uniforms, constantly changing their look, constantly changing their brand?
The Lions are a good team.
The Lions are a good team now, but historically, they're one of the worst franchises in the NFL.
Okay.
These teams that are constantly changing their uniforms, their brand, their look, it's because there's no identity. There's no stability. You don't see teams like Pittsburgh, for example, like Green Bay, San Francisco, Kansas City, Dallas, Baltimore. Teams with a winning history,
the
teams
Eagles
with a winning culture.
changed their font.
That's minute. That's not even close to the same thing. They have kept those classic unis for a long time. Those teams with stability, with a winning culture, they don't need to change their uniforms because their uniforms and their jerseys sell themselves, right? The teams with no winning history, the bad teams, Jacksonville, Tampa Bay, Detroit, Miami, Houston, it's a money grab, right? And that's why they do this, is to generate revenue, and I understand that, but what I'm going to say here is going to sound stupid.
Okay, listen, this is a safe space.
A lack of organizational stability it manifests itself in these uniform changes.
Ooh.
Right? You see what I'm saying?
I like the connection you're making here. Okay.
So I'm saying stability, like lack of stability equals brand change, uniform change, and that's all I'm saying. And that's and you can see it year to year. These bad teams that are constantly turning over uniforms, constantly turning over their logo, their brand, their look, it's the bad teams.
I don't think you're so off here. I actually think
I'm right on. I know I'm not wrong.
I agree with you partially here. I do think there's something to be said about evolving, changing up your look, being with the times. I think like the Lions, they've gone a few different directions over the years. They altered the original logo with the lion. They went back to a different one now. So I think they updated their logo and their uniforms to a good place. I think, the Jets have a new nice look. It's a little cleaner.
Right.
So, I mean, there's definitely reason to evolve and update. But yes, I do think teams like the Steelers, those are classic uniforms. You don't break something, or change something that's not broken, right?
Right. And I like what the Lions did. They went back to kind of a classic
uniform? Tell us that.
In the league right now?
Of the new changes we saw.
Easily Denver. Right. Easily Denver.
I like Houston's new look because I feel like they're on the upsurge. They got all this new energy, and now they're like playing with this new alternate look. I kind of like that.
I don't mind it. I liked what Houston had going on from a uniform perspective before. These ones aren't a whole lot different. I'm sure they'll grow on me. But they're a team that doesn't really have any history anyway. So they don't have any history in that old look.
Okay.
Speaking of teams that need a uniform change.
Oh, who needs a uniform change?
Carolina.
Yes.
Just old, bad uniforms, no real history. Need to, like you said, need to get with the times a little bit. I think Carolina is one of those teams in need of a uniform change. But.
Real quick, before we head to break, I have one last question for you on this. If tomorrow there was news that the Steelers changed up their logo, their uniforms, and everything, they just threw everything out the window, went completely brand new.
That would never happen. Continue.
If it happened, how quickly would you get behind it? Because I think you'd be behind it and liking tweets and Instagram posts in about 6 seconds.
I would never get behind it. But the Steelers would never do that. The only sort of uniform change I could get behind for the Steelers is if they went back to the block lettering.
Okay.
But the Steelers would never totally revamp their look and their brand because there's so much history there. There's so much winning associated with that look.
Even if you were like that little kid in the old commercial with Mean Joe Green and you were in the tunnel and he's coming off the field, and it's the brand new jersey, and you're still upset that they changed the jerseys. But Mean Joe Green looks behind, and he sees a little baby James Everett Bergman IV, and he tosses his jersey, and it's the new one. You wouldn't take that home with you? You just leave it there in the tunnel?
I would do whatever Mean Joe Green told me to do.
Okay.
You don't argue with Mean Joe Green.
All right, see, that's good. That's the advice everybody needs to take with them. Guys, we'll be right back after a short break. You do what Mean Joe Green tells you to do. Remember that. Welcome back to Sound Off Sports. Well, it's time for Sink or Swim. Listen, the NFL draft is a very interesting time for NFL franchises. If you think about it, there's nothing more highly valued in the NFL than a first round pick. I mean, maybe unless you have a franchise quarterback like Patrick Mahomes or something like that. But the fascinating thing is when you compare all the other big sports leagues, the first round pick, it doesn't equate to the same amount that we view it when it comes to the NFL. Guys like Brandon Ayuk they'd cost a first-round pick if you wanted to trade for him, like he's on the trade rumor, or like a Pat Surtain, from Denver. That would cost you a first-round pick. These are guys who are established, proven, Pro Bowl level players, and you're trading a first-round pick, an unknown commodity who still needs to prove something, for somebody who's already proven it. And that's what's so fascinating. Some organizations are able to have tremendous success without ever needing first-round picks. One team this year is drafting potentially in the first round for the first time since 2016. It's the LA Rams, okay? The last time they drafted a player in the first round was 2016, when they drafted and traded up to get Jared Goff. So Sean McVay became the head coach in 2017 after their relocation back to LA, and he hasn't drafted our first-round pick since he's been a head coach. This could be the first time in 8 years for him. So they've done very well without having a first-round pick. 5 playoff appearances in 7 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, 1 Super Bowl win, we remember, over the Bengals. So it's interesting, it's impressive, and I think it's interesting for us to ponder about how much first-round picks matter to a team's overall success. They've hit on so many late-round guys like Puka Nacua, Byron Young, Kyren Williams, Kobe Turner, even Cooper Kupp. So these are guys who are making an immediate impact, a difference, and they're getting drafted in the later rounds. Of course, GM Les Snead, he loves to wheel and deal. What are we going to see this year? They're slated to pick at 19 overall. They got a ton of picks in the 4th round. In the 6th round, I should say, in the 5th. So they got a lot of picks at their disposal. They've traded a lot for guys, like Stafford, Jalen Ramsey. Those were all guys acquired through trading first-round picks. So are we going to see the Rams ultimately take a guy first round this year? We'll see what happens. Maybe Sean McVay takes a QB to learn and sit behind Matt Stafford for a couple years. We'll see what happens next time on Sound Off Sports. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.